This is Tip TV Finance and meet Jenny Hammond and Zach Meir, and joining us today is Rob Proctor, CEO of audioBoom. It's good to have you with us today.
Good to be here, as ever.
Good. So you raised some money yesterday, so it's a good time for audioBoom. Talk me through it.
It is a good time. I mean, obviously, I think there was knowledge in the market that we needed to raise money. Hence the kind of conversations probably 9 months ago now with the whole Chinese fund, which we moved away from, given the intricacies of trying to get money from China actually to invest abroad. So to go out into the market with the new brokers and new Ondemand, new PR team on board as well. So it is good times, but actually probably better times for the business rather than just raising money. In terms of the UK media agencies finally coming on board with podcasting. I've been banging on about it for about 4 years now. Probably taken 18 months longer for the media agencies to realise the trend from people listening to radio to actually listening to on demand. Yeah. And normally what you find in most digital is when the users move, then ultimately the ad dollars move with that as well. And we're seeing that now in the UK. Hurrah!
Isn't that the point, though, that the playing field has changed, or the goalposts even have changed in your area, that since you started or became to market 2 or 3 years ago, it's become not about audience figures, it's become the on-demand revolution, which has changed. I mean, obviously the audience is part of it, but yeah, the way people listen has changed in a revolutionary way, and therefore you've had to adjust, or anybody in your area has to adjust.
We've adjusted slightly, so if you like, our route to market, where that revenue comes from, we obviously were looking at kind of the move of radio content from linear broadcast to on demand, and then running pre and post roll advertising on that pretty standard digital model. I think where it really has changed is the content that people are listening to on demand is now actually being made specifically for on-demand audiences. So it's not just reformatted radio, it's specifically made bespoke content that the people are listening to on their mobile or through other digital devices. So, and because of that, the model changed. So it's not pre and post roll advertising, it is. We're going to have 1.5 to 2 billion available ad impressions this year programmatically, which is great, but it's actually the in-read advertising within podcasting, so that's sponsored or host-read or product placed, whatever you want to call it. That's where there's huge growth, and I don't think anybody would have seen that 2 to 3 years ago. So this is a whole new bit. We've still got all the programmatic, and we're now filling that because of the agencies, but that really high value CPM in-read advertising is where there's massive growth, especially in the US, but now it's starting here in the UK.
What sort of figures are you looking at? Because obviously everybody's saying that there's this huge drive for podcasts, but are people downloading them? Are you really seeing the sort of huge quantity there?
Huge. I mean, not just our figures, but I mean the figures from the Internet Advertising Bureau, Edison, Pew, various other people. I mean, prediction is by the end of 2017, 40% of all listening will be on demand. To put that kind of into kind of a financial context, the US radio market's worth $19 billion, but 40% of those listeners have now moved on demand. So if 40% of the ad revenue went with them from radio to on demand, that would be a $7.6 billion industry this year. It isn't, and it won't be, because of the lag and delay in the agencies kind of realizing the trend, moving it. Plus also podcasters, networks like us, gathering up enough inventory to make the buy big enough for the media agencies. So it's a combination of factors. But
what sort of content is sort of ruling here? Because I imagine, it can't be up to date, can it? Because, they're pre-recorded and downloaded. So is there sort of trends you're seeing there?
They are, but let's say within kind of business or politics, it's, up to date but within a trend. So it might be a satirical podcast about Donald Trump, or it could be a business podcast about interest rate rises or not rising or what have you. So that's fairly on trend or fairly on point. The big genres are really around kind of not surprisingly, I guess, crime, true crime and all of that because of Serial. That was kind of a big breakout podcast. But we have probably 5 or 6 podcasts now in that area that are bigger than Serial ever was. One of them's actually made by the lawyers of Adnan Syed, who was the main figure in the Serial podcast. So his lawyers make a podcast called Undisclosed, which again, true crime, looks at different cases. That's on our platform. That's getting 1 to 1.5 million listens per episode, and they're doing an episode a week. But we've got Up and Vanished and Astonishing Legends and Untold, and They Walk Amongst Us. There's a whole bunch of podcasts.
Like everything, it's about marketing to get the podcast sort of to be popular, or?
Well, what's interesting, I think we've got to such a size now that, up until this point, in order to get a popular podcast, it had to be popular on iTunes.
Yeah.
We're a tier 1 development partner with iTunes, which is great. Really what that means is we get to put our podcast on the front page of iTunes. That's the only way to discover podcasts on iTunes. So that's great. But actually within our network now, so we brought on a podcast called Up and Vanished about 6 months ago, was doing about 250,000 listens an episode. But because we can get our other podcasters within the same genre to promote the new podcasts that come on, we can grow more rapidly. So we've gone from 250,000 to 750,000 listeners an episode in 6 months because of the network effect we can now generate.
So I just wanted to go maybe finish off with the investment side. You raised what I would regard as a proper amount of money, £4 million.
Yep.
That's there's no point faffing around with $500,000, $750,000 these days. So presumably that gives you quite a decent piggy bank from which to operate. And you also got this new team of various service providers, the PR people and
Yep.
brokers, etc. Do you think the market finally gets audioBoom, and do you think that the people that you've got now will get the message and take you from being a minnow to a medium-sized company?
Well, certainly within city terms, I think that's obviously the hope. I think where we sit today in terms of share price and our market cap and all of that, I think, as can be seen in the note, I think David at Allenby did a great job on the note. Interestingly, although the model continues to evolve, actually the number that we have out for 2017 pretty much was slightly higher than the number that Andy Bryant at Liberum had out, who was also another great analyst in the city. So it's two really well-respected people looking at the business, looking at our growth margins, the assumptions, sell-through rates, CPMs, all the good stuff, and have come to pretty much the same conclusion about the business for this year and through 18 and 19. I think what the money allows us to do now is, and we certainly went out on the basis, it takes us through to cash flow positive. I think we've done a great job of controlling costs. We've lost about 35% of the headcount in the UK. Some of that's coming back in now, but definitely on the sales and bespoke content side, we're building out the sales teams in the US more strongly, again, because of that. We've looked again at the Indian and Australian operations, so we've taken those headcounts down and used that money in building up the headcounts in the key markets. In Australia and India, it's going to take longer for the agencies to come to us. Can we afford to sit there and wait like we have in the UK for the agencies basically to cop on to what we do? No. So that's why we have the reorganisation of cash. But the money allows us to basically execute against the strategy, but also on the numbers that are out in the market.
You're sort of referring to capturing the imagination like a Snapchat or a Twitter or whatever, those sorts of companies where they're all high-tech, Silicon Valley, and people just say, yeah, I want to, that's a multi-million, multi-billion valuation. There's a PR job there, isn't there?
There's a PR job. I think... You look at the UK market, I don't think there's ever been a UK company that's been able to do that PR job. If we were Spotify and raised $1 billion from Goldman Sachs, you can do that job. We can afford to run a $500 million a year loss for 7 years and build our business, as Spotify has. Snapchat, you probably know the figures, have just floated at 23 billion valuation?
It's like 40 times losses. It's impressive.
What can I tell you? So is that ever going to happen in the UK market with the UK investor mindset and all of that?
That's the other thing. You would be much more appreciated if you were based out of Silicon Valley, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's a very fair point. We are a US-centric company. 65% of all of our listening is US based, 80% of all of our revenues are US based.
So things like that need to be told to people, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And certainly on this roadshow, we've gone out and done that, and we've expressed it. I think I've done a reasonable job of listening to our brokers over the last 18 months, and the advice was, under promise, over deliver, stay under the radar, don't put anything out in the market, blah, 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 blah. And we followed all that advice, and the PR company we had with us through that period followed that advice, and we do employ brokers at tens of £1,000s a year to give you that advice. I think with the team that we have in place now, with Allenby and with Walbrook on the PR side, we will certainly be, seen to be more proactive, certainly in our communications, our PR effort, the way we're using outreach like this and through social and various other things. We have a compelling story to tell, and maybe over the last 18 months we didn't. But I think with the people we have now, we do, and we're certainly going to go out and tell that story in a more forthright manner over the next year or two.
Fantastic. A company to watch then. Rob, thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's Rob Proctor there, CEO of AudioBoom.